Have you ever wondered why someone who clearly hurt you seems completely unbothered by what they did? How avoidants mask their guilt after hurting you reveals a complex psychological dance that most people never understand. The person who broke your heart, ignored your needs, or vanished without explanation might appear cold and unfeeling on the surface, but underneath that calm exterior lies a sophisticated system of mental gymnastics designed to protect them from the crushing weight of their own actions. When someone with avoidant attachment hurts another person, their mind immediately kicks into protective mode. Think of it like a computer running damage control software in the background. This psychological armor doesn't just appear randomly. It develops over years of learning that emotional vulnerability equals danger, that caring too much leads to pain, and that the safest place to be is behind walls that nobody can breach. The guilt is there, lurking beneath the surface, but acknowledging it would mean facing the very emotions they've spent a lifetime trying to avoid. Two powerful mental tricks help them maintain this emotional distance. Self-serving bias allows them to rewrite the story in their favor, turning themselves from the villain into the misunderstood hero. Negativity bias, meanwhile, helps them focus obsessively on every small flaw or mistake their partner made, using these minor infractions as shields against their own, much larger wrongdoings. Understanding these patterns isn't just about satisfying curiosity, it's about protecting your own emotional well-being and learning to recognize when someone is rewriting history to avoid taking responsibility. If you want to better understand someone's attachment style, see the link in the description to one of the most popular books on attachment theory. Picture this scenario. Sarah and James have been dating for 8 months. Everything seems perfect until Sarah starts talking about meeting his family during the holidays. James immediately feels trapped, like the walls are closing in around him. Instead of having an honest conversation about his fears, he starts pulling away. He stops texting as much, cancels dates at the last minute, and becomes mysteriously busy with work projects that didn't exist before. Sarah notices the change and tries to talk to him about it, but James brushes off her concerns, insisting everything is fine. The situation reaches a breaking point when Sarah finds out through social media that James went to a party with friends instead of the dinner they had planned. When she confronts him, hurt and confused, James doesn't apologize or try to explain. Instead, he becomes defensive and irritated. He tells her she's being too clingy, that she knew he valued his independence when they started dating, and that maybe they want different things. The conversation ends with James suggesting they take a break, leaving Sarah devastated and wondering what she did wrong. Here's where the masking begins. Deep down, James knows he handled the situation terribly. He knows Sarah deserved honesty about his fears, better communication about his needs, and certainly better treatment than being blindsided and abandoned. The guilt sits in his chest like a stone, but acknowledging it would mean facing the uncomfortable truth that he hurt someone who cared about him. So his mind begins working overtime to justify his actions and minimize his responsibility. James starts replaying every moment of their relationship through a different lens. He remembers the time Sarah wanted to spend a quiet evening together instead of going out with his friends, and suddenly that becomes evidence that she was controlling. He recalls her asking about his day and transforms those caring questions into invasive interrogations. Every normal relationship expectation Sarah had gets reframed as unreasonable demand. Like Joe Goldberg from the Netflix series You, James becomes the narrator of his own story, carefully editing out the parts that make him look bad while amplifying anything that makes Sarah seem difficult or demanding. Meanwhile, his negativity bias kicks into overdrive. That one time Sarah was 20 minutes late to a date becomes magnified into proof that she didn't respect his time. The evening she seemed tired and less talkative gets remembered as her being cold and distant. James finds himself building a mental case file against Sarah, collecting evidence of her supposed flaws while conveniently forgetting his own much more serious mistakes. The irony is striking. Someone who just abandoned a relationship without explanation is now mentally prosecuting their ex-partner for minor imperfections. Understanding these masking behaviors requires recognizing the deeper psychology at work. When you're dealing with someone who seems completely unbothered after hurting you, remember that their apparent indifference is actually a carefully constructed defense mechanism. The more hurt they caused, the harder their mind works to justify their actions and shift blame elsewhere. First, accept that you cannot force someone to acknowledge their role in hurting you. People with avoidant attachment will often double down on their justifications when confronted directly. Trying to make them see your perspective usually backfires, causing them to build even stronger defenses against guilt. This doesn't mean you're wrong about what happened. It means their psychological survival depends on not admitting they were wrong. Focus your energy on your own healing instead of trying to extract an apology or acknowledgement from them. Write down what actually happened between you, including their specific actions and words. This creates a factual record that helps you resist gaslighting attempts and self-doubt when they try to rewrite history. Remember that their version of events is filtered through layers of self-protection and bias, not objective truth. Set boundaries around what behavior you will and won't accept going forward. Someone who masks guilt by blaming you will often try to maintain contact while continuing to avoid responsibility. They might reach out when they're lonely or want something, but quickly return to defensive patterns when deeper issues come up. Decide in advance what kind of treatment you deserve and stick to those standards, even when they try to minimize their past behavior. Practice emotional detachment from their need to be right about everything. Think of Blair Waldorf from Gossip Girl. She often created elaborate narratives to justify her behavior, but the people around her learned not to take those stories personally. When someone is determined to avoid guilt, they will find ways to blame everyone except themselves. Their opinion of you says more about their emotional limitations than your actual worth. Build a support system of people who can remind you of reality when you start doubting yourself. Avoidant people are often skilled at making their victims question their own perceptions and memories. Having trusted friends who witness the relationship dynamics can help you maintain perspective when they try to convince you that their hurtful behavior was actually your fault. The painful truth about guilt masking is that it rarely resolves on its own. People who avoid responsibility tend to repeat these patterns in relationship after relationship, always finding new ways to justify their behavior and blame their partners. Understanding this isn't about becoming cynical or giving up on love. It's about protecting yourself from someone else's inability to face their own emotions honestly. Your healing doesn't depend on them admitting what they did wrong. Like Emily Cooper from Emily in Paris, navigating complicated relationship dynamics, you can choose to focus on your own growth and future happiness instead of waiting for someone else to validate your experience. The right person won't need elaborate mental gymnastics to avoid taking responsibility when they hurt you. They'll simply apologize, learn from their mistakes, and do better next time. That's the kind of emotional maturity worth waiting for, and the kind of relationship worth building your life around.
Thank you for watching. If you want to learn how to better understand avoidance, relationships, and psychological biases, then subscribe to our channel, because you deserve beautiful relationships.